The treaty officer's voice echoed through the wooden hall, calling names like a judge pronouncing sentences, and Zachary Yardley watched from the back row as men he had known all his life stepped forward to meet the orc women they would marry. He had scrubbed the dirt from under his fingernails that morning, put on his father's old coat, and walked the 3 miles from his farm expecting nothing more than duty. But when the small figure broke from the line of waiting brides and crossed the space between them with quick, determined steps, he realized duty had other plans. She barely reached his shoulder. Her skin was the color of new spring leaves, and her dark hair had been braided with small white flowers that looked like they might blow away in the draft from the open door. 2 small tusks curved up from her lower jaw, delicate as carved ivory, and her pointed ears trembled slightly as she stopped directly in front of him and raised one finger to point at his chest. "This one," she said, her voice clear and firm despite the way her hand shook. "I choose this one." The hall went silent. Zachary stared at her, his mind struggling to catch up with what was happening. The treaty officer, a thin man with spectacles and an expression of perpetual annoyance, looked up from his ledger with obvious irritation. "That is not how this works," the officer said. "The assignments are determined by lottery. Please return to your place." The orc woman did not move. Her amber eyes stayed fixed on Zachary's face, and he noticed for the first time that she was trembling, not with fear exactly, but with the kind of tension that came from doing something that could not be undone. "I choose him," she repeated. "The treaty says we are to be wives. It does not say we cannot choose." Murmurs rippled through the assembled crowd. Some of the human men shifted uncomfortably, while others looked openly hostile. Zachary saw Thomas Wardman, who owned the mill, lean over to whisper something to his neighbor, his face twisted with disdain. The other orc women remained in their line, watching with expressions that ranged from concern to something that might have been envy. The treaty officer set down his pen with deliberate precision. "The spirit of the arrangement is clear. Random assignment prevents favoritism and ensures fairness." "Fairness to whom?" The small orc woman's chin lifted. "I have agreed to leave my home, my family, my people. I have agreed to bind myself to a stranger in a land that does not want me. If I am to be a wife, I will choose the husband." Zachary found his voice, though it came out rougher than he intended. "Madam, I think you might want to reconsider. I am just a farmer, small plot old house, nothing special about it or me." She turned those amber eyes on him, and he felt the full weight of her attention. "I saw you last month." "In the village. An old woman's cart had lost a wheel and everyone walked past. You stopped. You fixed it, and you did not ask for payment. You did not even ask for thanks. You just went back to your business like it was nothing." She paused. "That is not nothing. That is everything." His ears burned. He barely remembered the incident, had thought nothing of it at the time. The old widow's cart had been blocking half the road, and it had taken him maybe 10 minutes to replace the pin that had worked loose. "That was just being decent," he said. "Yes," she agreed. "It was." The treaty officer cleared his throat loudly. "This is highly irregular. I cannot simply assign you based on a personal whim. The other men have been waiting. The lottery system has been established, and I cannot simply, cannot or will not." The orc woman's voice had an edge now. "I have read the treaty. Every word. I had it translated twice to be certain. It says we must marry. It says the marriages must be witnessed and recorded. It does not say I have no voice in the matter." An older man in the front row, Garrett Finch, who served on the village council, stood up. "Let her have him if she wants. One less assignment to argue about. The Yardley boy is solid enough, and if she is willing, I say we move on." "This sets a dangerous precedent," the treaty officer protested. "If we allow selection rather than assignment, we risk accusations of manipulation, corruption, preferential treatment. From who? Garrett asked bluntly. The other women looked content enough to wait their turn. The men sure are not going to complain about someone choosing them over forcing a draw. You are the only one making a fuss, Mr. Pemberton, and I cannot help but notice your system puts a lot of control in your hands. The treaty officer's face reddened. I resent the implication, no implication, just an observation. Garrett sat back down. Mark them down as matched and move along. Pemberton looked like he wanted to argue further, but the mood in the hall had shifted. Several other men were nodding, and even some of the ones who had looked hostile earlier now just seemed eager to get the proceedings moving. With a visible effort, the treaty officer dipped his pen and made a notation in his ledger. Name, he said curtly, addressing the orc woman, Tira Pinebrook. Tira Pinebrook matched to Zachary Yardley by. He paused, clearly searching for the right word, then settled on mutual agreement. You will be married within the week, as stipulated by the treaty. You will register your household with the district office within 30 days. You will report any address changes or alterations to your marital status immediately. Failure to comply will be considered a breach of treaty and subject to penalty. Do you understand? I understand, Tira said. Mr. Yardley. Zachary looked down at the small woman who had just upended his life. She was still trembling, and he realized with a jolt that she was afraid. Not of him, he thought, but of what she had done, of the risk she had taken. She had gambled everything on a single act of casual kindness that he had barely remembered. I understand, he said. Tira's shoulders dropped slightly, as if she had been holding her breath. Zachary offered her his arm, not sure if that was appropriate but not knowing what else to do. She took it, her fingers small and warm even through the fabric of his coat, and together they walked to the side of the hall where the matched couples were being directed. The rest of the proceedings passed in a blur. Zachary was aware of names being called, of other men stepping forward, of quiet conversations and occasional protests, but his attention kept returning to the woman at his side. She stood very straight, very still, watching everything with an intensity that suggested she was memorizing every face, every voice, every detail. When the last pair had been matched, Pemberton gave a short speech about the importance of the treaty, the weight of their responsibilities, and the necessity of making these marriages work for the sake of peace between their peoples. Zachary barely listened. He was too busy trying to figure out how his life had changed so completely in the span of an hour. They were dismissed with instructions to report to the village chapel in 3 days for a mass ceremony. Zachary and Tira stepped out into the cool afternoon air, and he became acutely aware that he had no idea what to say to her. You have things, he asked finally. Belongings you need to collect. They are at the boarding house where we have been staying. Tira glanced up at him, then quickly away. I did not bring much. We were told that our new households would provide what was necessary. Right, of course. He shifted his weight, trying to think. My place is about 3 miles west of here, not much, like I said. 2 rooms, garden plot, fields for wheat and barley. Got a cow, some chickens. It is quiet. I like quiet. Good. That is good. He felt like an idiot. We can go collect your things now if you want. I brought the wagon. She nodded, and they walked through the village in silence. People stared as they passed, some curious, some disapproving, some simply shocked. Zachary ignored them. He had never been one for worrying about what others thought, and he was not about to start now. The boarding house was a squat building near the edge of the village, run by a sour-faced woman named Agnes, who made no secret of her displeasure at housing orc women. She handed over Tira's bag with barely a word, and Zachary loaded it into the back of his wagon alongside the sacks of seed grain he had purchased that morning. He helped Tira up onto the seat, then climbed up beside her and clicked his tongue at the horse. The wagon creaked into motion, and the village fell away behind them. The road west was rutted and uneven, flanked by fields that were just beginning to show the first green shoots of spring planting. Zachary kept the horse to a steady walk, in no particular hurry to arrive. He needed time to think, to adjust, to figure out what came next. "Can I ask you something?" Tira's voice was quiet, almost hesitant. "Of course. Do you mind? That I chose you, I mean. You did not volunteer, you did not even step forward, I just pointed." Zachary considered the question. He was not an impulsive man, had never been one for quick decisions or dramatic gestures. He liked his routines, his quiet life, his predictable days. Tira represented the opposite of all of that, a sudden upheaval that he had not asked for and could not have anticipated. But when he thought about going back to that hall and watching her be assigned to someone else, maybe someone like Thomas Wardman, who had looked at her like she was livestock, or one of the younger men who had made crude jokes in the back row, he found the idea deeply unpleasant. "No," he said finally, "I do not mind, but you are not happy about it." "I did not say that," he glanced at her. "I am not unhappy, I am just adjusting. This morning I woke up alone. Tonight I will go to sleep knowing I am getting married in 3 days to a woman I just met. That takes some getting used to. For you," Tira said softly. "Imagine how it feels for me." He felt like an idiot. Again. Of course this was harder for her. She was the one who had left her home, her people, her entire world. She was the one who had to stand in a line like goods waiting to be claimed, and when she had tried to take some control back, she had been challenged and questioned and treated like she was doing something wrong. "I am sorry," he said. "You are right. That was thoughtless." "No, I understand what you meant. I just—" She trailed off, then started again. "I have been terrified every day since we crossed the border. Terrified of the humans who look at us like monsters. Terrified of being sent to live with someone cruel. Terrified of making a mistake that will break the treaty and give your people an excuse to start the war again. And today, when I saw you standing there, I thought, maybe I do not have to be as terrified. Maybe if I can choose just this once, I can choose something good." Her voice broke on the last word, and Zachary felt something shift in his chest. Without thinking too hard about it, he reached over and covered her hand with his. "You chose well enough," he said gruffly. "I am not much for talking, and I am not clever like some, but I keep my word. If we are going to be married, I will do my best to be a decent husband. I promise you that." Tira's fingers curled around his, holding tight. "Thank you." They did not speak much for the rest of the journey. The road wound through a stretch of forest, then opened up again onto rolling fields. Zachary's farm appeared in the distance, a small dark shape against the green land. The house was old, built by his grandfather, but the roof was solid and the walls were straight. The fields were neatly plowed, the fences mended, the garden plot freshly turned. It was not grand, but it was his, and he felt a sudden irrational hope that Tira would see something in it worth staying for. He pulled the wagon up in front of the house and climbed down, then turned to help Tira. She was staring at the farm with an expression he could not quite read. "It is smaller than I expected," she said. His heart sank. "I told you it was not much." "No, I mean," she shook her head, "I mean it is small enough to feel safe. Like you could put your arms around it and keep it protected. I like that." "Oh." He let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. "Come on. I will show you inside." The house was simple. A main room with a hearth, table, and chairs, and a smaller room in back with a bed and a chest for clothes. Zachary had cleaned before he left that morning, but he still saw it with fresh eyes and found it wanting. The floor could use a good scrub. The walls were bare except for a single shelf that held his mother's dishes. There were no curtains on the windows, no rugs on the floor, no softness anywhere. "I know it is plain," he started, but Tira was already walking around, touching things lightly with her fingertips. "It is clean," she said, "and it is warm, and it has windows that let in light. That is more than I expected." "What did you expect?" She hesitated. "I do not know. Something harsher, maybe. We were told that humans saw us as enemies, as things to be tolerated at best. I thought I would be sleeping in a barn or a shed." Zachary felt a flash of anger at whoever had told her that, had let her walk into this believing she would be treated like an animal. "You are going to be my wife," he said firmly. "You will sleep in a proper bed in a proper house, and anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me." Something in Tira's face softened. "You are a good man, Zachary Yardley. I am a decent one anyway." He rubbed the back of his neck, suddenly self-conscious. "Are you hungry? I have bread and cheese, and I can make soup if you want something hot." Bread and cheese sounds good. They sat at the table and ate in companionable silence. Zachary found himself watching her, noticing small things. The way she tucked her hair behind her pointed ears. The way she ate carefully, like she was still not entirely sure she was allowed. The way her eyes kept drifting to the windows, as if checking for danger. "You are safe here," he said. She looked at him, startled. "What?" "You keep looking at the windows like you expect someone to burst in. No one is going to hurt you here. I will not let them." Tira set down her bread. "You do not know me. We have spoken for maybe an hour total. Why would you defend me?" "Because you are going to be my wife," he said again, as if it were the simplest thing in the world. "And because it is the right thing to do, and because I do not like bullies." She stared at him for a long moment, and he wondered if he had said something wrong. But then she smiled, a real smile that showed her small tusks and made her eyes crinkle at the corners, and he felt that shift in his chest again. "I chose very well," she said softly. The next 3 days passed in a strange blur of normalcy and anticipation. Tira settled into the house with an ease that surprised them both. She mended the holes in his spare shirts, planted herbs in the garden, and reorganized the kitchen with quiet efficiency. She sang while she worked, low, wordless songs that Zachary found oddly soothing. He taught her the boundaries of the farm, showed her where the spring was that fed their water supply, introduced her to the cow and the chickens. She was not familiar with human agriculture, but she learned quickly, asking questions and listening to his answers with careful attention. They slept in separate rooms. Zachary gave her the bedroom and made a pallet for himself by the hearth. He told himself it was proper, that they were not yet married, but the truth was he did not know how to navigate the intimacy that marriage would require. They were still strangers, even if they were becoming friendly ones. On the 3rd day, they dressed in their best clothes and walked back to the village. The chapel was crowded with the other couples, all of them looking various degrees of uncomfortable. The ceremony was brief and impersonal, the priest racing through the words like he was trying to get it over with as quickly as possible. When it was done, Zachary and Tira found themselves standing outside with a piece of paper that declared them legally wed. "That was grim," Tira said. "Marriage ceremonies are supposed to be happier," Zachary agreed. "I am sorry it was not better. It does not matter. What matters is what comes after." She looked up at him, her expression serious. "I will be a good wife to you, Zachary, I promise, and I will be a good husband to you." He hesitated, then added, "Can I kiss you? Just once to seal the promise." Tira nodded, and he bent down and pressed his lips to hers, brief and chaste. It was the first time they had touched beyond holding hands, and it sent a warm shiver through him. They walked home hand in hand, and when they arrived, Zachary did not make a pallet by the hearth. They shared the bed, lying side by side in the darkness, not touching but aware of each other in every breath. "Good night, Tira," he said. "Good night, Zachary." He thought it would take him hours to fall asleep, but the warmth of her presence was surprisingly comforting, and he drifted off with a sense of peace he had not expected to feel. The next 2 weeks fell into a gentle rhythm. They worked the farm together, Zachary plowing while Tira followed behind with the seed basket, scattering wheat in careful handfuls. They ate their meals together, talking more easily now, sharing stories about their childhoods and their families. Zachary learned that Tira had 3 older brothers who had all fought in the war, that her mother made the best mushroom stew in their village, that she had once wanted to be a healer, but had not had the aptitude for it. Tira learned that Zachary had lost his parents to fever when he was 16, that he had taught himself to farm through trial and error, that he was deeply uncomfortable with crowds and loud noises. They learned each other's habits. Tira liked to wake before dawn and watch the sunrise. Zachary preferred to stay up late, listening to the night sounds. She was tidy to the point of obsession. He tended to leave his tools wherever he had last used them. She hummed when she was content. He went very quiet when he was worried, and slowly, carefully, they learned to be married. A hand on a shoulder as they passed each other in the kitchen. A shared smile over some small joke. The easy comfort of sitting together in the evening, reading or mending or simply being. Zachary found himself thinking less about what he had lost, the quiet, solitary life he had known before, and more about what he was gaining. Tira's laugh was a bright, unexpected thing that he found himself trying to provoke. Her concentration when she was learning something new was endearing. Her fierce determination to master every skill, from milking the cow to baking bread, made him want to support her in every way he could. He was not in love, not yet. But he thought he could be. He thought they both could be, and then the summons came. It was a bright morning in late spring, and Zachary was repairing the fence on the north pasture when he heard the sound of hoofbeats. He looked up to see a rider approaching, a young man in the dark uniform of the treaty office. Zachary's stomach tightened. Nothing good ever came from official visits. The rider pulled up and dismounted, pulling a sealed letter from his saddlebag. "Zachary Yardley, that's me. Summons from the district office. You and your wife are required to appear tomorrow at noon." The rider handed over the letter and remounted without waiting for a response, spurring his horse back toward the village. Zachary broke the seal and read the contents, his frown deepening with every line. They were being summoned to appear before the district clerk to address irregularities in their marriage assignment. Failure to appear would be considered a breach of treaty. Tira found him still standing there 10 minutes later, the letter crumpled in his fist. "What is wrong?" she asked, alarmed. He handed her the letter without speaking. She read it quickly, her face draining of color. "They are going to void it," she whispered. "They are going to void our marriage and reassign me. They are going to try." Zachary's voice was hard, "But I will not let them." "You do not understand. The treaty office has full authority over the marriage assignments. If Pemberton has decided my choice was improper, there is nothing we can do. They can dissolve the marriage and penalize both of us for non-compliance. Then we will make them understand that there was nothing improper about it." He took her hands, squeezing gently. "You chose me. I accepted. We were married by a priest in front of witnesses, and it was all recorded legally. They do not get to just undo that because Pemberton has a problem with it. You do not know him. He is the kind of man who hates to be challenged. I embarrassed him in front of everyone, and he is the type who will hold a grudge. Then he can hold it, but he is not taking you away from me." Tira looked up at him, her amber eyes wide. "You mean that? Of course I mean that. You are my wife. The words came easily now, natural as breathing. And I am not in the habit of giving up what is mine. Something flickered in her expression, something warm and wondering. Zachary. We will go tomorrow. We will answer their questions, and we will come home together. He said it like a promise, like a vow that mattered more than the one they had spoken in the chapel. I swear it. She nodded, blinking rapidly. Okay, we will fight this. They spent the rest of the day preparing, trying to anticipate what arguments might be raised against them. That night they lay in bed side by side, both too anxious to sleep. What if they do not listen? Tira asked into the darkness. They will listen. But what if they do not? What if Pemberton has already made up his mind? Zachary rolled over to face her. In the faint moonlight coming through the window, he could just make out her features, the worry etched in every line. Then we will figure something out. Maybe we go over his head, appeal to whoever oversees the district office. Maybe we get Garrett Finch and the village council to back us up. Maybe we just refuse to comply and dare them to do something about it. He reached out and traced a gentle finger along her cheek. I am not letting you go, Tira, not without a fight. She caught his hand and pressed it against her face. I fell in love with you, she said, the words tumbling out in a rush. That first day, when you did not even remember helping that old woman, when you looked at me like I was a person instead of a problem or a treaty obligation, I fell in love with you. And every day since has just made it worse, and I am terrified that I am going to lose you before I even had a chance to tell you. Zachary felt like the breath had been knocked out of him. Tira, you do not have to say it back. I know it is too soon. I know we have barely been married 2 weeks. I just needed you to know. I needed you to know that this matters to me, that you matter to me, that I do not regret choosing you even if it costs me everything. He leaned forward and kissed her, deeper this time, trying to pour everything he could not yet put into words into the press of his mouth against hers. When they broke apart, they were both breathing hard. I am not there yet, he said honestly, but I am getting there. And I want the chance to get there. I want the chance to wake up next to you for the next 50 years and figure out all the ways I can love you. So we are going to win tomorrow, understand? We are going to walk into that office and we are going to make them see that what we have is real and legal and not up for debate. Tira laughed, a shaky, breathless sound. When did you become so fierce? When someone tried to take my wife away from me. They made love that night for the first time, tentative and sweet and full of whispered promises. And when morning came, they dressed in their wedding clothes and walked to the village together, ready to fight for what they had built. The district office was a squat stone building in the center of the village, imposing and official. Zachary and Tira climbed the steps hand in hand, and a clerk directed them to a small room on the second floor. Pemberton was waiting for them, seated behind a large desk with his ledger open in front of him. He was not alone. A thin, nervous-looking man stood by the window, and a woman with hard eyes and an expensive dress sat in the corner, watching them with obvious disapproval. Mr. Yardley, Mrs. Pinebrook, Pemberton said, deliberately using Tira's maiden name. Please sit. They sat. Zachary kept his hand on Tira's, a silent show of unity. Pemberton folded his hands on top of the ledger. I will get straight to the point. It has come to my attention that there were significant irregularities in your marriage assignment. Specifically, Mrs. Pinebrook's decision to select her own husband rather than participate in the lottery system that was established for fairness and transparency. There was nothing irregular about it, Zachary said evenly. The treaty says the orc women must marry human men. It does not say they have no say in who. The spirit of the treaty is to create bonds between our peoples, Tira interrupted. How is it a bond if we are treated like chattel? How is it peace if we have no voice? The woman in the corner spoke up, her voice sharp. The system was designed to prevent exactly this sort of manipulation. If we allow selection rather than assignment, we open the door to corruption, bribery, coercion. I did not bribe her, Zachary said flatly. I did not even know her. She chose me because she saw me help someone once. That is not corruption. That is preference, and she had every right to it. The treaty clearly states, Pemberton began, but the nervous man by the window cleared his throat. Actually, sir, I have reviewed the treaty language, and it does not prohibit selection. It only requires that each eligible human man be paired with an orc woman, that the marriages be legally binding, and that both parties consent. If both Mr. Yardley and Mrs. Pinebrook consented to the match, then the requirements have been met. Pemberton's face reddened. That is a very narrow reading of the text, Dalton. It is the accurate reading of the text, the man, Dalton, said quietly. I am a solicitor, sir. Reading legal documents is what I do. The woman in the corner stood up abruptly. This is absurd. We all know the intent was random assignment. The girl manipulated the system, and now we are wasting time and resources adjudicating a match that should have been voided weeks ago. Why? Zachary asked. He kept his voice calm, but there was an edge to it now. Why should it have been voided? What harm has been done? Tira and I are married. We are fulfilling the requirements of the treaty. We have registered our household, we are living together, we are doing everything that was asked of us. So why are we here? Because you set a precedent, the woman snapped. If the other orc women hear that one of their own was allowed to choose, they will all start demanding the same. And then, where will we be? Chaos, favoritism, men being passed over because some girl decided they were not good enough. Or maybe men being chosen because the women saw something good in them, Tira said. Her voice was steady, but Zachary could feel the way her hand trembled in his. Maybe women being given a voice in their own futures instead of being handed out like prizes at a fair. You have no right to demand anything, the woman said coldly. You lost the war. This treaty is a mercy, and you should be grateful for whatever you are given. Mrs. Harcourt, that is enough, Dalton said sharply. This is a legal proceeding, not a political debate. Harcourt glared at him but subsided. Pemberton tapped his fingers on the desk, clearly trying to regain control of the situation. Regardless of the technical legality, he said, the fact remains that Mrs. Pinebrook's actions have caused significant disruption. 3 other orc women have now petitioned to change their assignments, citing her example. The men they were originally assigned to are understandably upset. We have complaints, confusion, and a complete breakdown of the orderly process we were attempting to maintain. Then maybe the process was not as good as you thought, Zachary said bluntly. If 3 women saw what Tira did and decided they wanted the same, maybe that is telling you something. It is telling me that we need to set an example, Pemberton said. We need to demonstrate that the rules cannot simply be ignored because someone decides they know better. What rules? Zachary leaned forward. Show me in the treaty where it says the women have no choice. Show me the law that says Tira was not allowed to choose me. Because if you cannot, then there is no rule being broken, and you are just making this up as you go because you do not like being challenged. Pemberton's face went from red to purple. How dare you? He dares because he is right, Dalton said. He stepped away from the window holding a sheaf of papers. I have the treaty here, sir. I have reviewed every clause, every provision, every line of text. There is nothing that prohibits an orc woman from expressing a preference, and there is nothing that requires random assignment. The lottery system was your idea, not a treaty requirement. Legally speaking, Mr. Yardley and Mrs. Pinebrook's marriage is completely valid. Pemberton snatched the papers from Dalton's hands, scanning them with obvious fury. The room fell into tense silence while he read. Finally, he set the papers down with a sharp snap. "Very well. If the letter of the law allows this, then I cannot void the marriage. But make no mistake, Mr. Yardley, I will be watching your household very closely. Any infraction, any failure to meet your treaty obligations, and I will have grounds to intervene." "Do I make myself clear, Crystal?" Zachary said. He stood, pulling Tira up with him. "Are we done here? For now." They turned to leave, but Harcourt's voice stopped them. "You think you have won something, but you have not. You have made enemies, both of you. And in a place like this, enemies are dangerous." Zachary looked at her, and there was something in his eyes that made her take a step back. "So are farmers who are protecting their families. Remember that." They walked out of the office and down the stairs, not speaking until they were outside in the bright spring sunshine. Then Tira turned and threw her arms around Zachary, holding him so tightly he could barely breathe. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it. Of course we did. I told you we would." She pulled back far enough to look at him, and there were tears streaming down her face. "I love you so much. I am getting there," he said again, but he was smiling. "Give me a little more time." They started walking home, but they had barely made it to the edge of the village when Dalton came hurrying after them. "Mr. Yardley, wait." Zachary stopped, wary. "What now?" Dalton caught up, slightly out of breath. "I just wanted to say, well done in there. You stood your ground, and you were right to do so. Thank you for backing us up. You did not have to." "Actually, I did. I am a solicitor. My job is to ensure the law is followed correctly, not to rubber stamp whatever Pemberton wants." He hesitated. "I should also tell you there is likely to be more trouble ahead. Mrs. Harcourt was not exaggerating when she said you had made enemies." "Who is she?" Tira asked. She seemed to have a lot of opinions for someone who was just sitting in the corner. "She is Pemberton's superior. District administrator for the treaty office. Very powerful, very well connected, and very invested in maintaining control over the marriage assignments." Dalton glanced around, making sure they were not overheard. "Between you and me, I think there is money involved. The treaty provides stipends for each marriage, funds to help the couples establish households. Someone with access to those funds and less than perfect scruples could easily find ways to skim a bit off the top." Zachary frowned. "You are saying Pemberton is stealing treaty money?" "I am saying it would not surprise me. And if he is, then your marriage represents a threat. Because you chose each other freely, you are more likely to be paying attention, more likely to notice if you do not receive what you are owed. Whereas a couple who were randomly assigned, who maybe do not even like each other very much, are less likely to rock the boat." "That is why he wanted to void our marriage," Tira said slowly. "Not because of precedent or disruption, because we are a risk to whatever he is doing, possibly. I do not have proof yet, but I am looking." Dalton straightened his coat. "In the meantime, be careful. Document everything you receive, every penny of the stipend, every interaction with the treaty office. If something is happening, we need evidence to prove it." "Why are you helping us?" Zachary asked. "Because the treaty is supposed to bring peace, not profit, and because I do not like bullies either." Dalton smiled slightly. "Good luck to you both." He walked back toward the district office, leaving Zachary and Tira standing in the street. "This is not over, is it?" Tira said. "No, but we knew that." Zachary took her hand again. "Come on, let us go home." They walked back to the farm in silence, both lost in thought. The confrontation had been exhausting, and the threat of future trouble hung over them like a storm cloud. But they had won this round, and that counted for something. When they reached the house, Tira went inside to start preparing dinner while Zachary tended to the evening chores. He was feeding the chickens when he heard the sound of hoofbeats again. He looked up to see Thomas Wardman riding up the path, his face twisted with anger. Zachary set down the feed bucket and waited, his body tense. Wardman dismounted and strode over, stopping just a few feet away. "You think you are so clever," Wardman said without preamble. "You and your little orc girl, making a mockery of the whole system. I think we followed the rules and got married, just like everyone else," Zachary said evenly. "What do you want, Thomas? I want you to know that you have not gotten away with anything. Pemberton might have backed down today, but there are other ways to deal with troublemakers." "Is that a threat?" "It is a fact. You have made enemies, Yardley, people with power, and when they come for you, do not expect anyone to help." Zachary felt a cold anger settle in his gut. He had known Thomas since they were children, had never liked him much, but this was a new level of hostility. "Why do you even care?" he asked. "You are not the one Tira chose. This does not affect you at all. It affects all of us. You let these orc women think they have power, think they can make demands, and it undermines everything. They need to know their place. Their place is as our wives, our partners, not our servants, not our property." Wardman laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "You are pathetic. Actually defending that creature like she is worth something. She is a trophy, Yardley, a spoil of war, and you are too soft to see it." Zachary moved before he could think better of it, crossing the space between them and grabbing Wardman by the front of his shirt. "Get off my land. Now. Before I make you." Wardman shoved him back, his hand going to the knife at his belt. "You want to fight me? Fine, let us see how tough you are." "Stop," they both turned. Tira was standing in the doorway of the house, her expression fierce. "Stop it, both of you. This is exactly what they want. They want us fighting each other, too distracted to notice what they are really doing." Wardman sneered at her. "No one asked you, orc. Maybe not. But I am asking you to leave. You are on our property making threats. That is trespassing and intimidation, both of which are illegal. So either go now, or I will walk back to the village and report you to the constable. Your choice." For a moment, Zachary thought Wardman was going to do something stupid, but then he stepped back, releasing his grip on the knife. "This is not over," he said. He mounted his horse and rode off, not looking back. Zachary stood there, breathing hard, his hands clenched into fists. Tira walked over and took his arm, gently pulling him toward the house. "Come inside," she said. "Let him go. He threatened us, I know. And we will deal with it if we have to, but not tonight." She looked up at him, her eyes soft. "Tonight we just survived something hard and we are still together. Let that be enough." He let her lead him inside. She sat him down at the table and poured him a cup of water, then sat across from him and took his hands. "I am sorry," she said. "I am sorry that choosing me has brought you all this trouble. Do not." His voice was sharp. "Do not apologize for that. You did nothing wrong. Wardman is an idiot and Pemberton is corrupt and Harcourt is a tyrant. None of that is your fault. But if I had just gone along with the lottery, then you would be married to some stranger right now, and I would be alone and neither of us would be happy. And that is not a better outcome." She smiled, small and tremulous. "You are sure?" "I am sure." He squeezed her hands. "Tira, I know I have not said it yet, but I need you to understand something. You matter to me. More than the farm, more than my reputation, more than whatever peace and quiet I had before. You matter, and I will fight to keep you. Every single time." The tears started again, spilling down her cheeks. "You are going to make me fall in love with you all over again. Good, maybe I will catch up eventually." She laughed through the tears, and he pulled her into his lap, holding her close. They sat like that for a long time, just breathing together, letting the tension of the day drain away. Outside, the sun set over the fields, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The chickens settled into their coop, and the cow lowed softly in her stall. The world continued on, indifferent to the small drama playing out in one farmhouse on the edge of the village. But inside, two people held each other and made silent promises about the future they would build together, no matter what obstacles stood in their way. The next few weeks were tense. Zachary and Tira went about their work, tending the farm and trying to maintain a sense of normalcy, but there was always an undercurrent of worry. Wardman rode past the farm several times, never stopping but always watching. Pemberton sent an inspector to check their household registration. A thin, officious man who poked through their belongings and asked invasive questions before finally declaring everything in order. And through it all, they waited for the other shoe to drop. It finally came in the form of a letter. Zachary found it nailed to their front door one morning, an official document bearing the seal of the district office. He ripped it down and read it, his face darkening with each line. Then he crumpled it in his fist and went to find Tira in the garden. "They are auditing us," he said without preamble. Tira looked up from the row of beans she was planting. "What does that mean?" "It means they are going to review all our finances, all our records, looking for any discrepancy or error they can use against us. If they find anything at all, they can claim we are in breach of treaty and void the marriage." Tira's face went pale. "Can they do that?" "According to this, yes. They are sending someone next week to go through our books." He paced back and forth, too agitated to stand still. "This is Pemberton's doing. Dalton warned us he would be looking for an excuse, and now he has manufactured one. But our records are fine. We have received the stipend every month. We have spent it on household expenses exactly as we are supposed to. We have kept every receipt and every ledger entry. I know. But that does not mean they will not find something or make something up." He stopped pacing and looked at her. "We need help. We need someone who knows the law, who can stand up to Pemberton and Harcourt if they try to twist things." "Dalton," Tira said immediately. "He helped us before. Maybe he would do it again. It is worth a try." They went to the village that afternoon and found Dalton in his small office above the apothecary shop. He listened to their story with a grave expression, then asked to see the letter. He read it carefully, his frown deepening. "This is highly unusual," he said. "Audits are typically reserved for cases where there is evidence of fraud or misuse of funds. They do not just audit every household on a whim." "Can they do this?" Zachary asked. "Technically, yes. The treaty does grant the district office broad authority to ensure compliance. But this—" He tapped the letter. "This feels like overreach, like they are looking for an excuse to find you in violation." "That is exactly what they are doing," Tira said. "They want to void our marriage, and they are willing to manufacture a reason to do it." Dalton set the letter down and steepled his fingers. "All right. Here is what we are going to do. I am going to request to be present during the audit as your legal representative. They cannot deny me that right. And while I am there, I am going to make very sure that everything is done by the book, that they do not fabricate evidence or misrepresent your records." "Can you do that?" Zachary asked. "I mean, will Pemberton even allow it?" "He does not have a choice. As a solicitor, I have the right to represent clients in official proceedings, and if he tries to block me, that in itself will be evidence of misconduct." Dalton smiled slightly. "Do not worry. I have dealt with corrupt officials before. Pemberton is not as clever as he thinks he is." Relief washed over Zachary. "Thank you. We can pay you. It might take a little time, but consider it pro bono," Dalton said. "I am doing this because it is the right thing to do. Besides, if Pemberton is stealing treaty funds, then exposing him is in everyone's best interest, not just yours." They left Dalton's office feeling marginally better. At least they would not be facing the audit alone. The auditor arrived the following week, a severe-looking woman with wire-rimmed spectacles and a briefcase full of forms. Dalton was with her, looking calm and professional in his best coat. Zachary and Tira showed them to the table, where they had laid out all their financial records. The ledger where Tira recorded every expense, the receipts for seed and tools and household goods, the bank book showing the monthly stipend deposits. The auditor, who introduced herself as Mrs. Clemens, began going through the records with meticulous attention. She checked every entry, compared every receipt to the ledger, questioned every expense that seemed even slightly unusual. "What is this?" she asked, pointing to an entry for 3 silver coins spent on fabric. "Curtains," Tira said. "For the windows. The house did not have any when I arrived. And this, 5 silver for a new plow blade. The old one broke during spring planting," Zachary said. "We had to replace it or we would not have been able to finish the field. And this, 2 silver for herbs and seeds, for the garden," Tira said. "Medicinal herbs, vegetables, to supplement our food supply." On and on it went, every single line item scrutinized. Dalton watched carefully, occasionally making notes but mostly just letting Mrs. Clemens work. After 3 hours, she finally sat back and removed her spectacles, rubbing her eyes. "Your records are impeccable," she said, and she did not sound happy about it. "Every expense is accounted for, every receipt is present, every ledger entry matches the documentation." "Is that a problem?" Dalton asked mildly. "No, of course not. It is just unusual. Most households are not this organized." "Perhaps most households do not have auditors threatening to void their marriages over minor bookkeeping errors," Dalton said. "Mr. Yardley and Mrs. Pinebrook have been understandably careful." Mrs. Clemens packed up her papers. "I will submit my report to Mr. Pemberton. Based on my findings, I see no evidence of misuse of funds or violation of treaty obligations." "Good," Dalton said. "Then this matter should be closed." The auditor left, and Dalton stayed behind for a few minutes. "Well done," he told Zachary and Tira. "Your organization saved you." There was nothing for her to find. "Will Pemberton accept that?" Tira asked. "He will have to. Mrs. Clemens is known for her integrity. If she says your records are clean, then they are clean, and even Pemberton cannot argue with that." Dalton hesitated. "But I have to tell you, this level of scrutiny is not normal. They are really trying to find a way to get rid of you." "Why?" Zachary demanded. "What did we do that is so terrible? We are just living our lives, following the treaty, not bothering anyone." "You embarrass them," Dalton said. "And you represent a threat to whatever scheme they have going. I am still digging, but I think I am close to finding proof. When I do, this will all be over." "And in the meantime," Tira asked, "in the meantime, keep doing what you are doing. Stay clean, stay organized, and do not give them any ammunition." He left, and Zachary and Tira were alone again. They stood in the middle of their home, surrounded by the records of their life together, and Zachary felt a wave of exhaustion wash over him. "I am tired of fighting," he admitted. "I just want to live in peace." Tira wrapped her arms around him. "I know, me too. But we are winning, Zachary. Every audit they send, every inspection they demand, we pass. And each time we do, we prove that we belong together, that our marriage is real and legal and not up for debate." "How long do we have to keep proving it? Until they give up? Or until Dalton finds whatever he is looking for and we can turn the tables?" She pulled back and looked up at him. "We can do this. We are strong enough." He kissed her forehead. "When did you become the optimistic one?" "When I married a man who keeps fighting for me even when he is exhausted. You inspire me, Zachary Yardley." He held her close, drawing strength from her presence. She was right. They were winning inch by inch. They just had to hold on a little longer. 2 weeks later, Dalton came to the farm unannounced. He was grinning, which was unusual enough that Zachary immediately went on alert. "What happened?" he asked. "I found it," Dalton said. "I found the proof." He laid out his evidence on the kitchen table. Ledgers, bank records, correspondence between Pemberton and Harcourt. The picture they painted was damning. Pemberton had been skimming from the marriage stipends, taking a percentage of each payment and pocketing it before the funds reached the couples. Over the course of a year, he had stolen hundreds of gold coins. But that was not all. Some of the couples had been deliberately mismatched, paired with people they were incompatible with, so that they would be miserable and inattentive. Those couples were less likely to notice if their stipend was short, less likely to complain or ask questions. And Harcourt had been complicit, covering for Pemberton in exchange for a share of the profits. "This is incredible," Zachary said, staring at the documents. "How did you get all this?" "I have been working with a clerk in the district office, someone who was uncomfortable with what was happening but afraid to speak up. She gave me access to the files, and I spent the last 2 weeks going through everything." Dalton's grin widened. "I am taking this to the regional magistrate tomorrow. Pemberton and Harcourt are finished." "What does this mean for us?" Tira asked. "It means you are vindicated. It means Pemberton's vendetta against you was motivated by corruption, not by any legitimate concern. And it means that every couple who was shortchanged will be compensated, including you." Zachary looked at Tira, hardly daring to believe it. "It is over." "It is over," Dalton confirmed. "You are free. Your marriage is secure and no one can challenge it again." Tira burst into tears and Zachary pulled her into his arms. They had been living under a cloud for so long that the sudden sunlight felt almost unreal. "Thank you," Zachary said to Dalton, his voice rough, "for everything. We could not have done this without you." "You did most of it yourselves," Dalton said. "You stood your ground, you kept your records clean, and you did not let them intimidate you. All I did was find the evidence to prove what you already knew, that you belong together." He left shortly after, promising to keep them informed of the proceedings against Pemberton and Harcourt. Zachary and Tira stood on the porch and watched him ride away, then turned to look at each other. "We did it," Tira whispered. "We actually did it." "We did," Zachary agreed. And then, because the words had been building inside him for weeks and he could not hold them back any longer, "I love you." Tira went very still. "What?" "I love you," he said again, more firmly this time. "I did not think I would, did not know if I could, but I do. I love the way you hum when you work, and the way you organize everything into neat rows, and the way you fight for what is right even when you are terrified. I love your laugh and your stubbornness, and the way you look at me like I am something special. I love you, Tira. And I am sorry it took me so long to say it." She threw herself at him, wrapping her arms around his neck and kissing him with a fierce joy that took his breath away. When they finally broke apart, they were both laughing and crying at the same time. "I love you too," she said, even though he already knew. "I love you so much." They stayed there on the porch, holding each other as the sun set over their fields, over the life they had built together despite every obstacle. And for the first time since they had been married, Zachary felt truly at peace. The next few months were a blur of activity. Pemberton and Harcourt were arrested and charged with embezzlement and corruption. The trial was swift and public, and the evidence Dalton had gathered was overwhelming. Both were convicted and sentenced to prison, and a new administrator was appointed to oversee the treaty office. The stipends were recalculated, and every couple who had been shortchanged received back payment. Zachary and Tira used their share to buy a second cow and expand the garden, making the farm a little more prosperous. The other couples who had been affected began to reach out, forming a loose community of support. Some of the marriages were thriving while others were struggling, but they all helped each other as best they could. It was not perfect, but it was better than what had come before. And through it all, Zachary and Tira grew closer. They learned each other's bodies and hearts, discovered new ways to make each other laugh, weathered small disagreements and celebrated small victories. Summer turned to autumn, and the fields yielded a good harvest. They worked side by side to bring in the wheat and barley, and when the last sheaf was stored in the barn, they collapsed on the porch in exhausted satisfaction. "Good year," Zachary said. "Very good year," Tira agreed. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Can I tell you something, always?" "I am pregnant." Zachary froze. Then he turned to look at her, hardly daring to believe. "Are you sure?" "I am sure. I saw the healer in the village last week. She confirmed it." Tira bit her lip. "Are you happy?" "Happy," he laughed, a big booming sound that startled the chickens. "I am thrilled. I am terrified and thrilled and completely overwhelmed." She grinned. "Good. That is how I feel too." He kissed her, then pulled her into his lap and held her close. A child. Their child. It seemed impossible, miraculous, a gift he had not known he wanted until this moment. "Boy or girl?" he asked. "Too early to tell, but I hope for a girl, a little daughter with your eyes and my determination. And my luck, she will have your stubbornness too, of course, the best trait to pass on." They sat together as the sky darkened, talking in low voices about names and cribs, and all the ways their lives were about to change. And when they finally went inside, it was with a sense of wonder and anticipation that made even the prospect of sleepless nights and dirty diapers seem like an adventure worth taking. Winter came, cold and quiet. The fields lay fallow under a blanket of snow, and the work of the farm slowed to a gentler rhythm. Zachary spent his days chopping wood and repairing tools, while Tira sewed tiny clothes and knitted blankets. Her belly grew round and heavy, and Zachary found himself constantly amazed by the changes in her body. He would rest his hand on her stomach and feel their child move, tiny kicks and rolls that never failed to make him smile. They prepared the small bedroom for the baby, building a cradle out of oak and lining it with soft wool. Tira painted flowers on the walls, delicate vines and blossoms that turned the plain room into something beautiful. And when spring arrived, bringing with it the first green shoots in the fields and the promise of new life, Tira went into labor. It was a long, difficult birth. The midwife came and stayed, coaching Tira through the contractions and sending Zachary to fetch water and towels and anything else that might be needed. He felt helpless, pacing the main room and listening to Tira's cries from the bedroom, every sound like a knife in his heart. But when the baby finally arrived, crying lustily and waving tiny fists, all the fear and pain melted away. "It is a girl," the midwife announced, wrapping the baby in a clean blanket and handing her to Tira. "A healthy, beautiful girl." Zachary stumbled into the room, hardly able to see through the tears in his eyes. Tira looked exhausted but radiant, cradling their daughter against her chest. The baby had Tira's green skin and pointed ears, but Zachary's dark hair and the shape of his nose. She was perfect. "Hello, little one," Tira whispered. "Welcome to the world." "What should we name her?" Zachary asked, his voice choked with emotion. Tira looked up at him, her eyes shining. "I was thinking Helena. It means light, and she is our light, is she not?" "Helena," Zachary repeated, testing the name. "Helena Yardley. I love it." He sat on the edge of the bed and put his arm around Tira, and together they looked down at their daughter. Helena blinked up at them with unfocused eyes, then yawned and snuggled closer to Tira. "She is so small," Zachary marveled. "How is she so small?" "All babies are small," Tira said, amused. "She will grow." Not too fast, I hope." They sat like that for a long time, just the three of them, marveling at the miracle they had created. The midwife cleaned up and left with instructions for Tira's recovery, and neighbors began to arrive with food and gifts and congratulations. Garrett Finch came by with a hand-carved rattle. Dalton brought a bottle of good wine for Zachary and Tira to share when things calmed down. Even some of the other orc wives came, offering advice and support and welcoming Helena into their small community. And through it all, Zachary felt a profound sense of gratitude for Tira, who had chosen him and changed his life in ways he could never have imagined. For Helena, who represented everything good and hopeful about the future. For the friends and neighbors who had stood by them even when things were hard. He thought back to that day in the village hall, when Tira had stepped out of line and pointed at him. He had thought his life was ending, that he was being forced into something he did not want. But he had been wrong. His life had been beginning. That night, after all the visitors had left and Helena was sleeping in her cradle, Zachary and Tira lay in bed together. They were both exhausted but too wired to sleep. "Thank you," Tira said softly. "For what?" "For accepting me when I chose you. For defending me when everyone else wanted to tear us apart. For loving me even though it was hard. For being the man I thought you were when I first saw you." Zachary pulled her closer. "You do not have to thank me for any of that. You chose me, but I chose you back. Every single day I choose you, and I always will." She kissed him, slow and sweet. "I choose you too, always." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, secure in the knowledge that whatever came next, they would face it together. Spring turned to summer, and Helena grew from a tiny, helpless infant into a bright, curious baby. She had Zachary's easy laugh and Tira's fierce determination, and she was utterly fearless. By the time she was 6 months old, she was crawling everywhere, getting into everything, and generally causing delightful chaos. Zachary built a small fence around the garden to keep her from eating the plants, and Tira sewed padded trousers to protect her knees when she crawled on the rough floors. They took turns carrying her in a sling while they worked, and she seemed perfectly content to watch the world go by from her perch on their chests. Life settled into a new rhythm, busier and messier than before, but richer too. Zachary taught Helena her first words, delighting in her attempts to say "Papa" and "Mama." Tira sang her to sleep every night with the same wordless songs she had sung while she worked, and Helena would hum along in her baby voice. They had visitors regularly now. The community of human-orc couples had grown closer, meeting once a month to share food and stories and support. Friendships formed that crossed the old boundaries of prejudice and fear. It was not perfect, and there were still those who disapproved or resented the marriages, but slowly, steadily, things were getting better. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching Helena chase fireflies in the yard, Tira said, "Do you ever regret it? Any of it?" Zachary looked at her surprised. "No, never. Why would you ask that?" "Because your life would be so much simpler if I had not chosen you. You could have stayed alone, stayed peaceful, stayed out of all the drama and danger we went through. Simpler, maybe, but not better." He reached over and took her hand. "Before you, my life was small, predictable, safe. And I thought that was what I wanted, but you showed me that I wanted more. I wanted someone to share my life with, someone to fight for, someone to build a future with. You gave me that. You gave me everything. Even when I dragged you into a battle with corrupt officials, especially then." He grinned. "You made me brave, Tira. You made me realize I was capable of more than I thought, and I will never regret that." She leaned her head on his shoulder and they watched their daughter play in the fading light. Helena had caught a firefly and was staring at it in wonder, her little face lit up with joy. "I love our life," Tira said quietly. Every messy, chaotic, beautiful moment of it. So do I. They sat like that until the stars came out, until Helena grew tired and started fussing, until it was time to bring her inside and tuck her into her cradle. And as Zachary blew out the lantern and climbed into bed beside his wife, he felt a deep, abiding contentment. This was what happiness looked like, he thought. Not grand gestures or epic romances, but quiet moments shared with the people you loved. A home built with work and care. A child who brought joy every single day. A partner who made even the hard times bearable. It was everything he had never known he wanted, and everything he would fight to keep. The years passed, measured in seasons and harvests and milestones. Helena grew from a baby into a bright, fearless little girl who loved helping in the garden and listening to her mother's stories. The farm prospered, the fields yielding good crops year after year. The community of human orc families grew stronger, more established, until the marriages were simply part of life, no longer remarkable or controversial. Zachary and Tira grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. They had their disagreements, their moments of frustration and misunderstanding, but they always came back to the foundation they had built: mutual respect, fierce loyalty, and a determination to choose each other every single day. And on a warm spring morning, 5 years after they had first met in that village hall, they stood together in their fields and watched Helena play in the newly turned soil. She was helping Tira plant seeds, carefully placing each one and patting the earth down over it, already learning the rhythms of farm life. Zachary put his arm around Tira's waist. "She is going to be a farmer, I think, or a healer, or a teacher, or anything she wants." Tira smiled up at him. "She has options, thanks to the world we are building. A world where humans and orcs can live together in peace. A world where a tiny orc woman can choose her own husband and not be punished for it." Zachary laughed. "Best choice I ever made, letting you choose me. Best risk I ever took, choosing you in the first place." They kissed, then turned their attention back to the fields. There was work to be done, seeds to plant, a future to secure. But they would do it together, as they had done everything since that first unexpected day. Helena called out from the garden, her voice bright and clear. "Mama, Papa, look, a butterfly." They walked over to admire the small orange butterfly perched on Helena's outstretched finger. She was giggling with delight, her green skin glowing in the sunlight, her pointed ears twitching with excitement. "It is beautiful," Tira said. "Just like you. Just like both of you," Zachary added, ruffling Helena's dark hair. They spent the rest of the morning working together, the three of them, and when the planting was done, they went inside to wash up and eat lunch. Tira had made a stew from vegetables from their garden, and they sat around the table, talking and laughing and planning for the summer ahead. This was their life now. This was what they had fought for, sacrificed for, built together from nothing. A home. A family. A love that had started with a single impulsive choice and had grown into something unbreakable. And as Zachary looked at his wife and daughter, both of them smiling and happy and safe, he knew that he would do it all again in a heartbeat. Every fight, every challenge, every moment of fear and doubt, because in the end, Tira had been right. She had chosen well, and so had he. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, warming the room and making everything glow. Helena was chattering about the seeds they had planted, already imagining the vegetables that would grow. Tira was adding herbs to the stew, humming one of her wordless songs. And Zachary sat at the table, his heart full, watching the two people who meant everything to him. This was happiness. This was home. This was the life he had never known he wanted, handed to him by a small, brave orc woman who had looked at him and seen something worth choosing. and every day for the rest of his life he would be grateful that she had pointed at him in that village hall and said, "This one. I choose this one," because choosing each other had been the beginning of everything.